No matter the challenges you and your family face, Tanager is here for you. We'll meet you wherever you are in your journey, and together, we'll define a path to meet your goals. Together we rise. Tanager.
Tanager and the Meraki Institute of Learning proudly present Together We Rise,
a series based on the RISE Wellness and Resilience framework.
In times of uncertainty and adversity, it is easy to feel overwhelmed and disheartened.
Amidst the challenges our community may face,
let us never lose sight of the strength and resilience that also resides in our neighborhoods.
This series highlights the vital role each of us have in nurturing that resilience.
That community impact.
The power and influence each of us have to show up in spaces
with empathy,
openness,
and kindness.
Because it is in this collective that connections grow stronger,
our compassion shines brighter,
and our spirit rises even higher.
It is together that we rise.
Welcome back for another episode of Together We Rise. Here today are your co-hosts, Tanya
and Jenny.
And today we get the pleasure of talking with Karey. Karey, why don't you introduce yourself?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here for sure. So I'm Karey Chase. I am currently the Vice President of Community Impact at United Way of East Central Iowa. So we are a VAS. We're the second largest United Way in the state, and we cover 5 counties, which is kind of fun. Have spent my career, which I was just tallying up as 25 years, in the nonprofit business now, and my first grown-up job right out of college was at Tanager Place, so it does feel a little full circle.
Yeah, so when Karey and I were chatting before this interview, she said that. I was like, oh my goodness, how neat is that? She was like, but wait, don't go back and look at that. That was 22-year-old Karey in the cottages.
I had no idea what I was getting myself into at that point.
But the really neat thing about that is so much of what we'll talk about today is resilience, right? We'll talk about wellness. And nothing exposes you more to the condition of mental health, brain health as residential services does. And nothing builds your character more than that, right? It's like this exposure of, okay, I have a whole different perspective and a whole different level of empathy now for this work.
Right.
We talked a little bit about that journey for you and a little bit about your why and why you believe so deeply in wellness for our community. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting because my journey has been one where I figure out probably what doesn't work best for me, and then I kind of try to move on to what does work best for me. And so,
well, I tell my kids we want to fail every day to learn. If we're not failing, we're not learning.
Exactly. So it was a definitely learning process all the way through. But I think even starting at Tanager, the one thing that I realized was fixing the kid wasn't the entire issue. And so I think without even knowing or understanding the words to put into it is really just understanding it is a holistic approach. Yeah. There's more than just a child's behavior. There's more than just the child's mental health. There's the family dynamics, there's cultural aspects, there's all kinds of things. And so I think that's really what I've always been trying to figure out in my journey was to try to get to that, how do we make our community really, I really love more systems work and higher level. And so I feel where I'm at now has is where I'm supposed to be because of all the experiences that I've had to be able to understand what it takes.
The impact on that systems, Jenny's heart. Where's your mind going, girlfriend?
Yeah, it resonated, of course, deeply with me, but it also came back to, when we first launched the Meraki Institute, we announced these 4 pillars of families, professionals, community members, and organizational systems, right, or businesses. And, when someone said, well, how does that relate to the work you do with kids? We said, well, if we really want to create change, lasting change for kids, or even work upstream, right, where we don't need necessarily all the treatment services, but we create a healthier system, we have to look at the adults who are in the lives of children. We have to look at the workplaces who facilitate opportunities and are engaging with those adults and so forth. There's that ripple extends forever, really, when you think about systems work.
Right,
Yeah.
correct. You know, it's just making sure, you know, to go back, I remember back when I was more doing like the BHIS services, right? Supervising some of that. And a lot of the diagnoses were adjustment disorder. And I know that if you trace some of that back, it's probably just the environment that was happening. Maybe there wasn't enough food, maybe housing was unstable, maybe there was violence in the home. And so there are so many factors, I think, that contribute to that wellness and well-being. And when you don't address all of those, then
Yeah. And
it's not going to work.
I love that you bring that up, because there's a piece of community impact of addressing all those and seeing all theirs. There's a piece of community impact of like having empathy that people are experiencing these struggles, that there are real barriers in our community for people, and that when we all show up with a little bit more empathy, that people have stories, that there are these struggles in our communities related to the systems that we're influencing.
Right.
Our choices, how we show up to all these things matter.
Well, and I told you this earlier, but if I could go back and apologize to every parent that I had to teach parenting to as like a 23, 24-year-old with no children, I apologize because now with 2 children of my own, it's a different understanding and dynamic, and there is a learning curve and maturity that goes into it. And and I think, I hope at least I always presented with empathy, as you know, as much as I probably could for a 20-some-year-old. But yeah, I definitely would go back and be like, you poor people.
You know, as human beings, there is no book that says, here are the things you need to learn to live life, and here's how you do all the things, right? Bless our parents for doing the best that they can with what they have and trying to teach those, and our teachers and everybody, but life is really about learning how to do the things, right? And I think so often in communities, we forget that I have the ability to provide some of those. What are my skills, and what can I offer you? How can I help you learn to do some things, and vice versa, right? That I'm curious, how does that idea kind of integrate into the work that you're doing now?
Yeah, so there's 2 things that really kind of stick out to me with that. The first is, so prior to being at United Way, I was at Four Oaks, and most recently I got to listen to Jim Ernst do like a Q&A session, and I was only there for about a year of crossover when Jim was there, but listening to him recall just the journey of Four Oaks, but the 2 things he said is like it was their job to build hope and instill opportunity, and like those are the 2 things. Like he said that, and I'm just like, that's it. We just have to like help bring hope and then create the opportunities and the pathways for people to be able to do that. And so I think like just always keeping that in mind. We're, you know, as United Way, we're always looking at opportunities that we can do that. And so we have this great little catchphrase that's like, unite to inspire via United Way, volunteering, investing, advocating, because those really are the 3 ways that I think you can influence and be a great community member. You know, it is the volunteer work. It is maybe mentoring and meeting with kids. It is investing in our nonprofits, because without philanthropic dollars, like our nonprofits, you know, aren't sustainable. And then the advocacy part is anywhere from just educating yourself all the way to maybe advocating, you know, at the state and federal level if you're able to.
Yeah, so much of what you just said makes me think about a core piece in the resilience framework that we center ourselves around efficacy. That oftentimes when we give those opportunities and people can then live into their strengths and give back in that way, we feel this sense of efficacy, or we feel this sense of purpose. And how much that creates more wellness, more resilience.
I just think about some of the things that the community is doing as a whole right now. I really truly feel like things are starting to shift a little in just how we are addressing those things, because I think sometimes what we find is like someone's personal journey, they can also try to do everything by the book and do it all, right? And there still are just some things that are blocking their success that I think that we now have the opportunity to really look into, looking into the deep dive of housing and just like some of the housing issues that we have and how we've come together as a community and now are strategically working on goals as a community towards housing for everyone. And so I just think of the power that together we're able to grant individuals, and I think that that's what inspires me and gets me excited, and I just want to take that and like replicate it and duplicate it and get people really excited about that.
You started to lead a committee at United Way, right? And you were telling me about one of the things that, as you started to lead that committee, your goal in that. And tell us a little bit about what that goal was.
One other thing that always runs through our community is disaster and talking about resiliency. So we can always put a pin in that and come back to that. But really after the derecho, we were in the middle of the pandemic, we decided as United Way that we needed to take a step back and really understand what were the community's concerns. And so we tried to do this collaboratively. We know there's always room for improvement, but one of the key things we did was we did some focus groups. And we were doing a focus group with some young women, young moms actually, and I remember we were going through and asking all the questions and getting their feedback, and afterwards she came up to me and was like, it's really great that you guys come and you ask us everything, but you never come back with solutions. And that like hurt because it was truth. Like we can go and we can ask, but it's usually like one-dimensional. We never go back with, we're actually, because it's the hard work, right? You gotta do the hard work to be able to get to the solution. So,
and sometimes I think we feel like we have to do all the hard work, like
that we're responsible for those solutions.
Let's all do the hard work, right? Like we all get to be a part of the solution.
Yes,
This is a random thought.
Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. And I think the one thing that we have learned from that too is that we also can't do this in silos, but do it in silos without hearing community voice. And it's one thing I can't make an assumption of what one person's barrier is when it could be not another person's. And so we really have started to work toward making sure that we are getting community voice as we move forward in any type of collaborative solutions.
Yeah.
One thing that came up for me, as you were sharing a while ago, and then even Tanya, when you shared that, I think it's so cool. For a long time in my career, I really didn't know a whole lot about like serving on a board, right? What does that mean? What does it entail? Who are the people that get chosen, and how does that all happen? But as time goes on, what I find so fascinating is some of the greatest boards are the most diverse set of skills and people and experience around those boards. My aunt is one of my greatest inspirations, and recently was asked to be on a board, and she was saying like, Jenny, I don't even know what I have to offer to a board. And I thought, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? Like, you're the person I send these things to. Like, you are a person, you're one of my go-tos. Of course I would want you on my board. You're on my personal board. Right. And so I think though sometimes as a community member, we might be sitting there thinking like, I could never be there. It's those unique skills that people bring that say, hey, what if we solve this problem with doing something like this? Here's what we do in my world or my, field. That's so important.
Yeah, at 100%, absolutely. We heard that call, obviously, and we actually have the BOLD program, which is our
we
board,
have a staff member. Yeah, we got accepted into it.
which is our board orientation leadership development class. And it is a cohort, and what I love about it is, again, it's that collaborative spirit that I hope United Way brings, and that we ask our nonprofits and usually a chair to come and teach the class. And so Opara is always a favorite. He gets to come in and teach, but it's leveraging our nonprofits. Then that shows exposure to our community members too, as to different ones. Every lesson, they get to learn a new interesting facet about being a board member, whether it be the funness of budgets and financials, all the way to advocacy and resource development and what are the expectations. You know, sometimes you go in and you've got the Robert's rules, and sometimes it's a really loose, you know, kind of. So it really is interesting. And then you also get to audit some boards and sit in and see what a board is like. And, you know, our United Way board is a little more structured and larger, and you may go to a smaller nonprofit and it's not as, it's maybe more of a working board. So that's one way that we've been really excited to help the community and help our nonprofits in building that diversity.
I love that though, because it makes me think of like you're leveraging people's strengths, you're giving them purpose, you're helping them create, you know, improvement in their community. It increases their sense of efficacy. And one of the things you mentioned earlier that like kind of reminds me of like what's the spirit of that is you said there seems to be a disaster that runs through this community. And I think about our sense of efficacy when disaster hits, right? Because we call on everybody. Everyone gets to come have a role to give back, to feel like they're needed and their strengths are utilized. And how we create that spirit when a disaster doesn't even happen. You know, how we create a community where we're continuing to call on people's strengths and sense of efficacy so that we continue to have a healthy community.
I was just in a conversation. I got to chaperone a high school dance this last weekend. Luckily, I did coat check, so it wasn't as bad. But the parent that I was with, we were really kind of going back to derecho and how we, you know, in our own like personal response in our neighborhoods, like it was like everyone hands down dropped everything and helped each other. And she made the comment that she's like, sometimes I wish we could just go back there and like relive that spirit. And I think that's exactly kind of what you're talking to is how do we get to that place without having to go through a natural disaster every time, right?
Right? I think speaks so much to the spirit of volunteerism, right? Like how do we as a community really bolster that spirit of volunteerism and that idea of, you know, what you do in your 9 to 5 or if you're retired or whatever, you know, daily life looks like, there is still so much that you can do with these side talents or these skills of passion or even just, you know, purposeful skills, right? Again, we talked about like how important it is for, you know, the philanthropy and supporting nonprofits that way, but on the flip side of that, if you can come and build a shelf, like that's amazing, right? Or if you can come and do things, but in my experience working with volunteers, when we really know what skills are special to them and what skills give them that sense of efficacy and like, this is really where I feel connected to others when I'm doing this thing, it makes the whole experience so much more meaningful and effective and impactful on the work that we do as nonprofits even.
Absolutely. I think it's that purpose, right? Yeah.
And it's so neat though because I didn't know how much United Way's engaged in this until recently. We were doing some Festival of Trees stuff and the initial link like had me go sign a profile at United Way, and day by day there's like so many volunteer opportunities. And so tell me a little bit about that, because we know if I volunteer, if I give back, I'm more likely to be well, I'm more likely to be resilient, but it also makes my community better, right? So how would people get involved with something like that?
Absolutely. There's so many like on-ramps to be able to volunteer. The first one to start with is just I call it our match.com of volunteer. Okay. So it's called Volunteer Now, and you can basically, that's where nonprofits like Tanager can go and list volunteer experiences. And if you were like, I would really love to start to volunteer, you can go and kind of peruse the menu and see what fits for you in the description. So that's like a really easy hands-off approach, one-stop shop, which is great. We have the privilege of being able to go in multiple companies and do our fundraising for our community, which is like great and wonderful and exciting. And through that, though, we also work with a lot of, through workplace, just doing different volunteer opportunities. So obviously the biggest one probably is Day of Caring, where everyone kind of goes out on that lovely day. And actually I love driving around because whatever color shirt it is, you see them everywhere, and it's wonderful. But I think like just, you know, we consistently have different groups that are coming to us saying, hey, we would really love to volunteer as a group. We're seeing, especially as people are returning to work and they want to be able to maybe do some culture building or whatever it may be in their workplace, those experiences seem very important. We have a 55 plus program, which is like tailored to individuals who are 55 and older, and ensuring that if they need a little bit more of kind of a concierge service where we're able to understand their needs as volunteers and then be really willing to seek out opportunities and like connect them. So there really is, you know, so many. Right now, VITA's going on, which is our volunteer income tax assistance, and that's. I actually took a call today from a woman, and she was like, "What does VITA even mean?" And I'm like, "Volunteer income tax assistance." She's like, "Oh, I thought that was somebody's name," and I'm like, "We should totally use it. A little character named VITA. VITA does VITA."
Well, we're working on a lot of programming things in our inpatient program, and one of those is our volunteers. And, you know, part of the program is getting kids to go volunteer because we know that it creates a greater sense of wellness when we give back, especially because some of our most vulnerable members in our communities feel like people always give to them and they have nothing to contribute. And there couldn't be any further truth from that, right? That because every person, even if you need poured into for resources or whatever, has something to give that has strengths that are needed in this community, in this world. You know, I was thinking, they were saying, well, you know, there are some places that said, you know, not right now, they're not seeking volunteers, so it's not going to be as robust as we want. And I was like, well, are you guys drawing pictures for nursing homes? Are you writing a letter of encouragement to the University of Iowa Children's Hospital? And they're like, oh, I guess we could do those things. And it's like, you have so many strengths. Like, you have so much to give back.
Yeah.
We have to create space for it.
Absolutely, absolutely. My daughter graduates this year, and she has spent the last 3 years volunteering, and I know that I know why it was initially, right? It's to build up that college application and all the things, and it really has become, I think, a joy to her, and she has been able to experience a lot of different nonprofits and how that can help, and I just 100% I see how she was able to do that, and like how it's developed in her, and would love to see that. And especially, like you said, like we all have our special skills. How do we help others with those and help identify those?
I love it.
I just think about too, and that's a wonderful example, like when she's 25 or 30, how much each one of those volunteer experiences is going to be a part of her resilience, right? When you think about adapting to different nonprofits or different organizations or just different roles even, right?
Absolutely.
We likely don't switch jobs that often, but we're still learning new things, even if I'm bringing my skills here, right? Or I'm doing whatever, but I'm still learning how to adapt in those systems again, right? How to have empathy to those that I am contributing with or working with alongside of.
That's exactly, you know, I was like, oh my gosh, should I volunteer growing up? And I was like, I got my license. I lived in a really, really small town. Got my license, and I was like, I want to go volunteer in the big city, you know, Cedar Rapids, Iowa. So I volunteered at 16 at HD Henry Davis Youth Center.
Okay.
And I think just in this moment, thinking back of like, also how much more resilient and well we are as a community, because I was able to experience things outside of what I would normally experience. I was able to be exposed to things that I wouldn't. I was able to gain greater perspective and empathy and challenge my own bias. I was able to cultivate like emotional intelligence and how to be patient and how to be nice and kind and caring, you know, like how much all those little things matter in the bigger scheme of what we do. And that's kind of like what United Way represents. It's like the heart of United Way.
I think it's interesting because when you go into more rural areas, they're like volunteering. Like we just help each other, right? Like it is just a different kind of viewpoint of it. It's not volunteering, it's just our way of life. And that probably gets to the whole efficacy and resiliency too. Like if we can just get to that point where we're just helping each other.
You know, I think through this entire conversation, the thing that continues to resonate for me is don't overcomplicate it. Like, get to know your neighbor, give a friendly smile, open a door. You have something to contribute and to give back. You have strengths that are needed. Our community, Karey, has been so lucky to receive the work that you've done. I didn't realize like the trajectory of all the things that you've done in your career until we talked on the phone. I was like, oh my goodness. If there was one last thing that you wanted to say, like one piece of advice for the audience who is listening or a way that they can give back, what would you say?
I come at it as where are the issues and how can we solve those issues, right? And I think the one thing is that we all do have a piece in it. Even if you don't think you do, you do. Thinking of like our homeless population right now and the NIMBY, not in my backyard, right? Like that's a mental state that we have to shift and alter. And so, you know, I love it if people are engaged and they're volunteering and they're investing and they're advocating, they're doing all the things and supporting. But some of it is going to have to go to how we're shifting that mental model that's just resonates to be able, I think, to continue to grow. To keep we want to keep our kids here, right? We want to attract people here. We want everyone here to just have that hope and opportunity.
Yes, yeah. I love that. I love connecting that mental model with the values of this community, which is diversity, it's equity, it's inclusion, it's collaboration, it's co-creation. It is every story matters and we're all part of the solution.
Right. Yep.
Karey, thank you so much for being
thank
here
you.
today.
Thank
yes,
you
and
so
for
much.
all that you've done for giving to Tanager 25 years ago. Thank you so much for all that you do.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Stay tuned. Next time on Together We Rise.
What if you could be the best thing that happened to somebody today? And what would that feel like if instead of being the thing that just made everything that was already worse and even worse, what if that was the opportunity for somebody to pause and have a moment and go, okay, I'm okay.
No matter the challenges you and your family face, Tanager is here for you. We'll meet you wherever you are in your journey and together define a path to reach your goals. Together we rise.
Thank you for joining us today and for spending time with us. We hope today's segment offered hope and inspiration. Today's series brought to you by Tanager and the Meraki Institute of Learning. For more information, please visit our website at www.tanagerplace.org.
Being a teenager is hard enough. Finding places to fit in, overcoming fears, and dealing with the stress of finding acceptance can be overwhelming. The LGBTQ Center at Tanager provides a safe and confidential environment for LGBTQ youth, families, and allies. Programs at the center are diverse and include support groups, mentoring programs, parent workshops, tutoring, and so much more. Meet new people and build a support network at the center. To learn more, visit tanagerplace.org. Tanager. Inspire, empower, heal.